Welcome to House of Horrors. Some sins never fade, some souls never rest, and some curses last forever. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones. This is The Curse of Salem, Part 3. Now, let's begin. After Abaddon was sealed, an eerie silence fell over Salem. The cracks in the church cellar had closed, and the sinister whispers had vanished. Yet, deep within me, unease lingered. The message carved into the cellar door echoed in my mind. The door remains ajar. That morning, during the prayer service, Emily and Mark were there. Lily sat quietly in her father's arms. The fear in her eyes was gone, but her face remained unnaturally blank. After the sermon, I approached her. "Lily, sweetheart, how do you feel?" "I'm fine," she said softly. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "But he's here." My heart stopped. "Who, Lily?" She didn't respond. Her eyes drifted toward the shadows behind the altar. That night, I stayed in the church. I gripped the cross tightly, whispering prayers as I watched the shadows. At exactly 3 a.m., a crackling sound came from the cellar. The door creaked open by itself. I descended the steps, holding a candle. The seal was still on the floor, but now a thin crack ran through its center. A whisper drifted from the darkness. "Cole, I'm watching you." I began to pray. The crack trembled, but it didn't vanish. I reopened Edward Thompson's book, Demonis Obscurum. In one chapter, I found a chilling warning. When the seal weakens, the dark seeps through once more. To strengthen the seal, a second ritual was required. Fidei Custodia, the guardian of faith ritual. The instructions were as follows: consecrated oil, a trace of a pure soul, 77 prayers spoken with unshakable faith. A vigil maintained for 3 consecutive nights. I began gathering the materials immediately. From Lily, I took a single strand of hair. Emily hesitated but agreed when I assured her that this ritual would protect her daughter. I lit the candles around the seal, poured consecrated oil in a protective circle, and knelt to pray. With the light of the Lord, I strengthened this seal. Let the innocent be free. Let the dark be bound. At 2:45 a.m., the cellar door slammed open. A small figure stepped from the shadows. It was Eleanor Thompson. Her pale face was expressionless as she whispered, "Pastor Cole, why did you come back?" "To free you from the darkness," I answered. She shook her head. "It's too late. The door will fully open." Then she vanished into the shadows. I returned to the church at sunset and resumed the ritual. At exactly 3 a.m., the seal trembled beneath me. Black mist oozed from the crack, curling through the air like living smoke. Abaddon's voice filled the room. "Cole, your faith is weak. You're not strong enough." I raised a cross. "God is with me." I roared. I pressed the cross against the seal. The mist recoiled with a screech, but the crack grew wider. The air was cold and sharp as a blade. At 2:30 a.m., the ground split open beneath the seal. A deep, jagged fissure formed, stretching across the cellar floor. From that darkness, Abaddon emerged. This time its shadowy form loomed larger, more defined. The walls trembled beneath its presence. Its voice slithered through the icy air. "You cannot stop me, Cole." I held the seal high and began the final prayer. "In the name of the Lord, I cast you from this sacred ground. Return to the abyss and release the innocent." The seal glowed, sending beams of golden light into the crack. Abaddon recoiled, screeching in rage. But the fissure remained open. Suddenly I saw her, Lily. She stood at the entrance to the cellar. Her eyes were wide, glassy, and pitch black. "Lily?" I whispered. She stepped forward. "She's ours now," Abaddon hissed. Black tears streamed down Lily's pale cheeks. I raised the cross high and slammed it into the floor. "May the light of God destroy you, Abaddon." A blinding light exploded from the seal. Abaddon shrieked, its shadowy form twisting and writhing as it was pulled back into the crack. The fissure closed with a deafening roar. Lily collapsed. I caught her before she hit the ground. She was breathing but unconscious. When Lily awoke, she gave me a sleepy smile. "He's gone," she whispered. Her parents wept with relief. That night, as I locked the church doors, I saw it. A new message carved into the wood. "The door is closed, but the key is yours, Pastor Cole." I gripped the cross, my heart pounding. The battle was over. But the war had only just begun. The door was closed, but the key was mine. The message carved into the wall that night pierced me to my core. I didn't know what the key was, but I knew one thing for certain. Abaddon was still lurking in the shadows, waiting. That morning, while I was praying in the church, Emily came to me. Her voice trembled. "Lily doesn't have nightmares anymore," she said. "But at night, she stands by the window, staring into the dark." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "Did she say anything?" I asked. Emily hesitated, her eyes glistening. "Last night she said, 'The key is in his pocket.'" My hand instinctively reached for my coat pocket. The cold metal was still there. The seal, Lux Aeterna. I descended into the cellar, placed the seal on the table, and reopened Demonis Obscurum. Hours passed as I turned the brittle pages. Finally, in the corner of a torn page, I found a note scribbled in faded ink. "The key opens as it closes. Without sacrifice, the darkness spreads. Sacrifice. The one who steps forward with faith is me." The time had come to prepare the ritual. This time, the goal was to seal the door permanently. The required materials: consecrated oil, the trace of a pure soul, Lily's hair. A final prayer of unwavering faith. The seal placed at the heart of the cellar. I laid the items on the altar and whispered, "Lord, if it is your will, guide me through this final act." The clock struck 12. I stood alone in the cellar, surrounded by flickering candles. I placed Lily's hair atop the seal. Raising my hands, I began the prayer. "By the light of the Lord, I seal this gate forever. Let the reign of Abaddon end tonight." The ground trembled. A crack split the floor beneath the seal. Black mist surged upward as a figure emerged. "Abaddon." "Pastor Cole, you've returned," the shadow hissed. "Give me the key." I gripped the cross tighter. "I will seal you here forever." I shouted, "Dot." Abaddon roared. The shadows lashed out, swirling toward me like serpents. I thrust the cross forward. Lux Aeterna. The seal pulsed with blinding light. The shadows recoiled, but didn't retreat. Then I saw her. Lily stood in the corner of the cellar. Her eyes were as black as the abyss. "Come with him, Pastor Cole," she whispered. Her voice was soft, empty. "If you don't, I'll go with him instead." Terror gripped me. Lily or me. One of us had to go. I didn't sleep. I sat in the church pew, whispering prayers until dawn. The answer became clear. To close the door, I had to sacrifice myself. The seal was the key. But once the gate closed, I would never return. That morning, I visited Emily and Mark. I held Lily in my arms one last time. "Always walk in the light, sweetheart," I whispered. She smiled and hugged me. She didn't know it was goodbye. The candles flickered in the cold air. I clutched the seal and stepped into the circle. "With the light of the Lord, I seal this gate for eternity. I offer my soul in sacrifice." The ground shook violently. The crack burst open once more. Abaddon erupted from the abyss, roaring with rage. "Your soul is not enough, Cole," the demon screeched. I raised the seal high. "In the name of the Lord, I bind you to the cursed gate." I slammed the seal into the crack. A deafening roar filled the cellar. The seal glowed white-hot as tendrils of shadow coiled around my body, dragging me toward the fissure. The last thing I heard was Lily's voice. "Thank you, Pastor Cole." When I opened my eyes, the cellar was empty. The seal was gone, embedded in the stone floor. The crack had vanished. Abaddon was gone. Lily was safe. But when I turned toward the wall, I froze. In the faint light of the candles, I saw my reflection. There was no face, just a shadow. Carved into the wall above me was a new message. Sacrifice is the purest form of faith. I stared at the words for a long time. The battle was over, but I was no longer among the living. A thick fog had settled over Salem. Outside the church, the wind howled against the stone walls. The ritual I performed in the cellar had trapped Abaddon beyond the gate. But I was no longer the same. When I stood before a mirror, there was no reflection. My body remained here, yet my soul was left at the threshold. As I unlocked the church doors, I saw Lily and her family waiting. Lily's eyes no longer held fear. She ran toward me and hugged my waist. "Thank you, Pastor Cole," she whispered. I forced a smile, but dread coiled in my chest. The cellar was sealed. Yet Abaddon's whisper lingered in the shadows of my mind. I spent the day scouring the old church records. I discovered a passage from 1743 written by Father Jonathan Reed, a priest who had encountered a similar dark entity. His diary held one haunting line: "The darkness echoes long after the door is closed. To silence it requires the ultimate sacrifice." Another sacrifice? I descended into the cellar. The seal remained intact, glowing faintly from the stone. But the air was different. It felt colder, sharper like a blade against the skin. I knelt and began to pray. "In the name of the Lord, I end this curse for eternity." The walls groaned, cracks slithered across the stone. The candles flickered and died. From the shadows, the voice returned. "Pastor Cole, you cannot silence me." Abaddon was still here. That morning, amidst the church's routine letters and offerings, one envelope stood out. There was no return address, no stamp, only my name. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of brittle paper with a single line: "The key that closes the door frees the soul." The key? My pulse quickened. The seal? It was still lodged in the cellar floor. I returned to the cellar that night. The seal, Lux Aeterna, lay embedded in the stone, but a crack now split through its center. I knelt and reached out. The moment my fingers touched the cold metal, darkness engulfed me. Abaddon's voice rose from the void. "Pastor Cole, give me your soul, and I'll leave Lily be." My knees buckled. Fear clawed at my chest. But no, I couldn't abandon Lily to the darkness. I lifted the cross high. The light of the Lord is eternal, lux aeterna. The seal blazed with white fire. Abaddon's form materialized, tall, shapeless, void of features. You can't hold me here, you're nothing but a shadow now. I steadied my grip and whispered, even a shadow can carry the light. Raising my voice, I declared, in the name of God, I bind you to this gate forever. I drove the seal into the crack. The ground split open beneath it. From the abyss, Abaddon screamed a sound that shook the very walls of the church. If you do this, Cole, you'll stay here with me. I didn't hesitate. So be it. I opened my eyes. The cellar was silent. The crack had vanished. The seal lay fused into the stone, glowing softly. I rose and climbed the stairs. Outside the church doors, Lily stood with her parents. I called out, but they didn't turn. They couldn't see me, but Lily, she lifted her gaze and looked directly at me, ... Thank you, Pastor Cole, she whispered. Then she smiled. I walked through the streets of Salem. No one saw me. No one heard my footsteps. I was no longer part of their world. My soul remained forever at the threshold. Journal entries end. In 1997, during a renovation of Salem Church's cellar, workers discovered a fractured metal seal inscribed with the words, Lux Aeterna, the eternal light. From that year onward, there were no more reports of missing children in Salem. Yet some locals passing by the old church at night swore they heard a faint voice whispering from within, The light of God is eternal. The end. Some stories don't end here. Some curses last forever. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and turn on notifications for more horror tales. And next time, make sure you're not alone in the dark. Good night from House of Horrors.